Welcome to the Legend of the Five Rings Dojo. I'm Corey. Come on in. Make yourself at home. I know it's dark in here, so be careful coming in. Oh geez, okay. That was irreplaceable. Are you okay? As we head into duels and skirmishes, we have to talk about two specific actions that are quite complicated: movement and strikes. Today we cover movement. You might be asking, can such a small topic like movement be enough for an entire video? Well, just look at that time code. Yeah. Moving in Rokugan has a mind's eye feel to it. This means there are no miniatures, there are no board. They tried to make it easy to see the battle in your mind. Note I said tried, because while it does work most of the time, it can break down in a few key situations. But I'm getting ahead of myself as usual. When you're playing the game, you can simply say you want to move to a place and the Game Master tells you if you can or you can't. If the Game Master says you can, boom, you're there, easy peasy. If the Game Master tells you you can't, it's usually followed up by some sort of reason. There's an obstacle that keeps you from moving there. This obstacle can be anything from being tied down, to being too fat to get to that location, to the location being guarded, or the location in question has been vaporized into a fine mist. Weird stuff can happen in RPGs. If the player character can overcome the obstacle, then they can move to their desired location. These are the rules that are most notably followed during narrative and downtime scenes, but also intrigue scenes, and to a lesser extent, duels and mass battles. Where we are most concerned is skirmishes, where movement is much more constrained. A skirmish is a conflict scene where there are more than two combatants involved in a physical altercation. This is your basic battle in an RPG. Everyone rolls initiative, and in turn order, every player moves and then attacks an opponent, blah 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 blah. Because skirmishes are extremely tactical, positioning, terrain, and range are important, so movement becomes exacting.
Range bands.
Before we get to talking about how we move, we have to have a way to measure distance. In L5R, we don't use meters or feet, but instead use an abstract quality called a range band. One range band equals something, some such or other. Sometimes it's one sword's width from your opponent. Other times it's the length of two horses or more. It just depends on the situation. Because of the strange nature of range bands, you must always explain a range band in relation to something else. For example, you cannot say a room is 3 range bands long, but you can say that your character is 3 range bands away from a door. This is important for setting the stage for combat. When a player asks how far away they are from an enemy, you can say something like range 4, but the boss, he's further back at range 5. This can give players an idea in their head of the spatial relationships between characters without large numbers like 10 or 20 yards, or doing complex math in their heads like, your enemy is 25 yards away and I move 30 feet, how many rounds until I close distance? Still, it does become problematic not to have at least an idea of what a range band is, and Fantasy Flight gives us this handy chart right here. Notice that range bands get larger in a more or less exponential way. Again, this is an attempt to simplify things, i.e. archery is range 4, so any character in that range band can be hit by your character's arrows. Never mind the fact that the standard bow, the Yumi, has a range of 2 to 5. How does this work in practice? Well, I'll try to set the stage of a skirmish. The lion and crab burst through the door to confront the Oni and the 4 zombies. Sneaking in through the window, the scorpion decides to take a more cautious approach. Both the crab and the lion are within 2 to 3 range bands of the shambling corpses, while the Oni sits on a throne of bone at the range of 4. The window is a bit closer, at range 3 to the Oni, but is still 2 range bands from the zombies. They're more towards the center of the room. Did I paint a good mental picture? Can you see the placement of all the characters and objects in your mind? Does it look sort of like this? Now, the crab and the lion move 2 range bands forward to meet the zombies and bring their range to the zombies down to 0. Does this mean they're now at range 2 with the Oni, or is the Oni still at range 4? I described the Oni behind the zombies, right? You'd think moving towards the zombies would also reduce the number of range bands to the Oni, but since range bands are exponential, closing range bands with the zombies isn't enough distance to reduce the range to the Oni at all. If you're a player and would like to call bullshit on this rule, well, I feel you, brother. But just for the sake of argument, let's say the crab moved 2 range bands to meet the zombies, but the lion moved 2 range bands towards the Oni. Wouldn't this mean the lion somehow moved farther than the crab? He just passed all those zombies right on by to get within striking distance of the Oni. Weird, huh? Now let's add another level of difficulty to this. Instead of 4 zombies, now there are 12. Some are at range 2, some are at range 3, and some are even behind the Oni in reserve at range 4 and 5. Can you keep all that in your head? What if there are 5 players instead of 3? We've had another drawback of this game: mobs. Since there are no rules dedicated to mobs, every single NPC is handled as a single entity. So keeping track of them mentally can be a pain. Pulling out a piece of paper and jotting down some lines and numbers can help, of course, but if you're doing that, you might as well go back to good old maps and miniatures. Thankfully, the book has rules for that, but more on that later.
Maneuvers.
Once per turn in skirmishes, before or after your action, your character may move a single range band. As I said before, a range band is in relation to something, so you have to move one range band towards or away from a person or object. You may think it seems weird that moving from range band 6 to 5 covers more ground than from 3 to 2, but the book explains this by the pressure of combat. Quote, "This reflects the difficulty inherent in closing with or escaping a foe while allowing characters to reposition strategically when not being impeded." It might make more sense then, following this logic, that movement must be in relation to the nearest enemy, or the nearest enemy in the direction the PC is traveling. This interpretation would fix the problem that you could just bolt past enemies to get at the farthest enemy, even though the rules don't specifically forbid it. This does make range bands a bit goofy when moving towards an object. Does the object pressure you to move slower when you're approaching it? Would it be weird if all the runners of a race were to slow down as they approach the finish line, like some parody of Achilles and the Tortoise? There's a joke there for all you philosophy majors. Like in every game, there are ways to move farther. Many techniques have built-in ways of moving, but the main way is the maneuver action. Any character can take a maneuver action, following the standard rules of taking actions. But that said, this is one of the most complicated rules in the game. Maneuvers do 2 things. First, it allows 1 more range band of movement. Secondly, as an option, you can make a fitness roll, using the ring of your current stance at TN2. If you succeed, you move another additional range band, and then 1 more on top of that for each 2 bonus successes. The question is, why wouldn't you want to make that fitness check? The answer? Water stance. Water stance allows a character to take an additional action as long as that action does not have the same action type, and, more importantly, does not require a check. Since Maneuver's fitness check is optional, not required, a character can take that as their second action, as long as they don't make the optional check for extra movement. Now I know what you're about to say. Water stance doesn't say you can't make the check, only that you can't take an action with a required check. This is a rules lawyer statement if I ever heard one. You and I both know the spirit of water stance rule is that a character cannot make a second check. That said, there's no clarification in the errata, and if you're a really nice GM, I suppose you could allow it, but that means the NPCs get to do the same thing, so maybe you're not so nice after all. Hey guys, it's After the Fact me. I missed something in the main rules again, and I'm going to take a little second to fill you in on 2 things that are important to movement. One is mounts, and you can use these rules, I guess, for like dogs or anything that's running on 4 legs. And, of course, disabled people who have lost a leg. So first off, the skill you use when doing horsemanship checks is survival, and you can replace any fitness check with survival when on horseback. Secondly, when you succeed at a movement action, you get to add bonus successes equal to the creature's water ring. Lastly, if you're on a mount, they can go double the normal rate in downtime and narrative scenes. If your character has lost a leg or has a maimed leg, anything that impedes movement that way, there's the lost leg disadvantage. It does one of two things. First off, if you're in a narrative downtime scene, all movement takes double. Secondly, if you are making a check that is movement related with the water ring, you have to re-roll 2 of your successful dice. So that should cover anything for people on crutches or even wheelchairs.
Tactical maps.
Mobs, spacing, moving quicker at longer ranges, all of this weirdness of mind's eye movement are solved by tactical maps. The only problem? You have to have maps and miniatures. There are drawbacks to maps and minis. For example, it makes the game feel more like a board game, more structured rather than a role-playing experience. And it also costs money. If you like tactical maps, or you're having trouble with the standard movement rules, I do recommend the optional range bands on a tactical grid rule. First, we need to convert ranges for weapons from range bands to boxes or hexes. On page 266, there's this handy guide showing how many squares or hexes each range band consists of. This is only for calculating range of weapons, not for movement. Remember, range 0 is the square or hex the character currently is in. Movement is converted by taking each range band of movement and making it a flat 3 squares or hexes. Look, I'm not going to call them squares of movement. That's stupid terminology, especially since I love hexes, like all great GMs do.
You know, hexagons are the bestagons.
Instead, I'm going to call them movement points. For every 1 range band of movement, you get 3 movement points. That can move you 1 square hex per movement point. There is no extra movement for being farther away. If a character can move more than 1 range band in a round, a character can combine all of their movement points from all of those sources when making their move. If you're using squares, moving diagonally takes an additional movement point, which can stack with other movement penalties. But you're a smart GM that uses hexes, so don't worry about this. Exiting any square or hex that is considered difficult terrain costs 1 more movement point. Difficult terrain consists of any space that contains an enemy, i.e. range 0. Is entangling terrain, or other wacky circumstances like moving vertically. Each source stacks with the other, so moving out of an enemy space while knee-deep in mud in a diagonal direction costs 4 movement points. If a character does not have enough movement points to make a legal move, they must either change their movement or end it there. Movement points not used by the end of the turn are lost.
Terrain.
Naturally, the area a character is in can change the dynamic of any scene, from the rocking of a boat, fighting in brambles, fog, or the depths of the Shadowlands. Terrain is also measured in range bands from a certain point. I guess every GM should have some sort of physical marker to which terrain stems from, something unmovable so it can always be referenced. For example, going back to our heroes against the Oni, there could be broken glass extending 2 range bands in front of the Throne of Bone, making it dangerous terrain there. Don't tell the PCs this. All terrain is a secret. The only way to know about it is if the player spends an opportunity on initiative, or accidentally steps into it. So that area on fire over there, players don't know it's dangerous terrain unless they spend opportunity to know. That's right, it's another stupid rule from L5R. Obvious terrain features should be, obvious. People should know them at the beginning of the scene. The opportunity should only be useful if there is something hidden or easily overlooked. Here is a list of terrain from the core rules. I'm sure you can think of more and add them to your game. You can stack terrain as well, making a foggy swamp be both obscuring and entangling. It also recommends you make locales for fights exciting by adding terrain features, but not to get too bogged down, stating, quote, "Keep in mind, however, that combat in L5R is meant to be narrative and quick. The presence or absence of terrain features is more important than their exact position down to the inch. Really, L5R? Quick? This is the first of 5 videos on combat. Just covering the basics. I can't with you right. I'm leaving. Dangerous terrain are any hazard that can give damage. Intense heat, cold, building is on fire, thorny brambles, broken glass. Any character in the terrain will take physical damage, i.e. fatigue, equal to the number of dice they keep with strife symbols on any check they make. So, what if they don't perform a check? Well, I guess the terrain doesn't hurt them? Yeah, that's weird. Defile Terrain is basically unhallowed or cursed terrain. Stuff of the Shadowlands. This doesn't have any real impact on a scene, but rather, any scene where a character is in Defile Terrain, at the end of it, they must make a TN2 fitness or meditation check, and if they fail, they become afflicted, which is the first step to becoming tainted. Characters already tainted reduce the TN by 1 because they're used to it. It's like, you know, it's their bath. Remember, if a character is carrying a sacred item on them, that item becomes damaged instead of the character becoming afflicted. Entangling terrain is anything that slows you down. Mud, deep snow, hedges, skating rinks. All it does is increase the TN of moving and movement actions by 2. If you're using map-based combat, it uses up an extra movement point. I think we covered this. Hollowed terrain is the inverse of defiled. Usually it's temples, but it could be around portals to the afterlife or other realms, the convergence of ley lines. Are there ley lines in Rokugan? The homes of fairies? Oh yeah, there are definitely fairies. The GM picks one or more ring they think is important to that location. Meditation and theology TNs using those rings are decreased by 1. Conversely, tainted characters have their TNs increased by 1, or by 2 if they're using the rings in question, when, and only when, they are resisting effects. Imbalanced terrain is when the kami go wild, doing things they don't normally do, or if they leave an area, making it hard to do things with those kami. A barren field, or a raging storm, or any chaotic natural event could be attributed to an imbalanced terrain. The GM, again, picks 1 or more rings. Meditation and theology TNs are now increased by 1 when using that ring. Also, otherworldly beings like dragons and ghosts have their TNs to resist effects increased by 1, or by 2 if they're using that specified ring. As an aside, I'd also like to point out published adventures like the Oni's Mask and Sin of Regret have added effects to imbalanced terrain. For example, an imbalanced air terrain might have gale-forced winds the PCs must also fight against. Obscuring terrain is anything that's hard to see through. Fog, bushes, a clown in a storm drain, anything hiding just off screen. Ah! You could even use it for combat involving those cool scenes of fighting shadows against paper screens. I love those. All attack checks against characters in obscuring terrain have their TNs increased by 1. I'd probably extend this to objects too in case someone needs to destroy an evil statue in the fog. Any character or object further than 2 range bands from another character inside obscuring terrain cannot be seen by that character. If your character is within 2 range bands of the edge of obscuring terrain, you can see out of it just fine. So you can hide inside obscuring terrain to watch others safely. That's it for moving. If you think I missed anything, or if I got a rule wrong, I'd really like to know, so don't be afraid to tell me. Also, let me know if you prefer maps or mind's eye combat and why. If you like this video, you can hit the like button, subscribe, bell, you know the drill. I got my patrons right here, and if you like, you can join them at patreon.com/JedUnicorn, where I am currently playing Battle for Rokugan against them on Tabletop Simulator and just wrecking house. I hope to see you there. Until then, it's time to move on out of here. But before I go, I'd like to remind you to never stop gaining experience.